is Ruth Mason Kimmel now. And
Mine's Morris Harry Kimmel.
I was born in 1926, December 1st. It was actually Hanukkah time, and my father dearly wanted a son because he had 2 girls already, and I was a girl. He was I was told it was a bit of a disappointment to him, so he didn't go to shul to give me my name until the very last minute. And when they asked him why, he said, well, there was no hurry, but we all knew that a boy is a kaddish, and most of the men and most of the people at that time wanted a son, a son, a son. Later in life, towards when he was older and I was with him, at the end of his life, he said, my daughter is, to the rabbi, my daughter is as good to me as 10 sons. A good memory. Now your turn.
My father was born in Poland. They walked from Poland to the Galilee. He got malaria there. He came to New York City when he was 16 years old, and with 5 brothers, and I think 3 sisters.
Yeah.
And they went to New York City, and then they, one brother got a job as a carpenter at University of Iowa, and the 2 brothers came with him. And my father bought a little horse and buggy, and he opened a little junk business. He started his business that way. And he got a shotgun, married my mother. She was from Lithuania. And
Because he was a Kohen.
my mother died in Chicago from pneumonia, I guess, or something, or miscarriage or something. I don't know what it was.
He was only 2 years old.
What?
You were only 2 years old.
I was 2 years old when she died, and the shotgun fixed up another marriage with a woman from Memphis, Tennessee, and she had 3 brothers. They were gangsters.
She wanted Morris to be American. She was born American, so they didn't speak Yiddish in their home. And his father started to tell me a little bit about his life when he came to New York, and she hushed him up. She wouldn't let him talk about his early life before her because she was the second wife. So I feel sad that I didn't get a chance to talk to his father a little bit more about his early life, other than he carried leather on his back in New York City. And then he told me he went to the peep shows there, and she hushed him up real quick and didn't let him talk anymore. So we really didn't get a chance to question his father about his early life other than in Israel. When my daughter Julie went to Israel, he said to her, why are you going to Israel? It's terrible. It's all mosquitoes there and malaria. And that was what he had as a child in their swampland. So we were happy that she was going for a year in Israel, but he remembered his childhood.
We went there.
He was only 13 years old.
My daughter was 18. We went there for 10 days.
And my family, you ask about my family was both Russians, from Russia, some town near the Dnieper River, Mazir I think it was called, or near there. And my father spoke about his father and his grandfather. I know his history quite well. His background. He told me once that he did not like Gomorrah. It was boring and he didn't dull. So his father was very angry at him because he didn't like Gomorrah, but he did the best he could to educate him Talmudically. And he said that his grandfather, on the other hand, had an apple orchard or something. And every time he'd come to his grandfather, who was his Zaidi Tevye, he would give him an apple, that was a little apple. And he was very good to him. So he remembers a grandfather with fond memories. But his father was severe. He wanted them to learn Torah and Gomorrah. And My father apparently wasn't a sitter to scholar. He liked, in later life when I knew him, he'd have me read in the Yiddish newspaper to him a serial that ran in the forward, Der Katz, that means the cat. And he liked folk stories and more, although he was very literate, he was a shy man and he never wanted to go. You know, I used to ask him, why don't you go to the Torah, Pa? And he'd say, well, you go if they call me. If they call you, you have to go, and they don't refuse them. But he'd rather the other men went there. And he stayed in the background, but when he did speak at a doing or something, he had a lot to say. I will say that. And I learned a lot of literature. I was very surprised when I was in great books, and I came and I was talking to him about the great books that we're studying. He said, oh, you want to be a philosopher? Epictetus and all those. He knew about it. He read it in Yiddish, those kind of books. And he used to go to Mrs. Kimmels at the Jewish Center Library on, where was it? It was in Detroit there. They had a nice library. Curtis, yeah. And she'd pick out books for him. And every Sunday, my husband would take him to the Jewish Center Library to get books in Yiddish. Growing up there was a beautiful, beautiful time because from the university, students used to come to the shul there in Iowa City, and we had speakers come there. At one time, speakers came from New York because it was a town that contributed heavily to all the Jewish organizations worldwide, and it was sort of a different kind of town because of that situation that we had the university there culturally. So mostly a child growing up there didn't have a great many Jewish children, but they did have a shul, an Orthodox shul. They had about 25, in our generation, about 25 Jewish families. More came earlier when there was an influx of Jewish people coming from Rock Island, Illinois, Chicago, Illinois, but later on, when our generation came along, they had moved away so that the children could marry into Jewish families. But there were about 25 Jewish families, and we did have a cheder there. He and I both went to the same cheder because we were the same age, and I have a picture of us standing. He's standing behind me in almost every school picture we have. He's standing right behind me, sort of a sheriff that way. So it was a good growing up, place to grow up in, a healthy atmosphere, and also we had enough Jewishness in our families to stick together.
We had to take and kosher our meat. The meat was not kosher when we got it anymore. They had to be put it on the salted, and my stepmother koshered it, and she was a good cook. My mother died when I was 2 years old.
Where did she get her meat?
And she's buried in Chicago, and I have to go see her grave every now and then.
We were in a spelling contest.
What?
You and I were in a spelling contest together in second grade. Our name was in the paper. I wish I had saved the clipping. That we won the prize for the best spellers in the second grade school. He dates our meeting to kindergarten, but I think it even started the relationship. We were in the same grade earlier than that. Even the town was small, and people knew one another. And we were in cheder together, basically, 3 times or 4 times a week. But he was with boys, and I was with about 4 other girls, and there wasn't much interaction except on Jewish holidays. We had Pesach, a play, and the teacher composed a play. His name was Mr. Tabai, and I think that the friendship was not that great. The boys were with the boys and the girls were with the girls. And in high school, as I remember, we dated very few times, about 3-4 times. I remember my sister telling me, my oldest sister, when you go with Morris, he's not a rich boy. Don't order the most expensive thing on the menu, because it's not right for you to have him spend all his money on you. Then in the senior year, there was a dance, and it was a homecoming dance, and we went to that dance together. And there was another Jewish boy, his rival.
Reuben.
So he thought that was it, but he prevailed over Reuben.
Reuben married a shiksa.
And he's happy.
Oh, no.
I just wasn't ready for steady dating. I put my my mind to studying schoolwork and heavily getting good grades and good marks. And when it came time to go to university, I knew that I wanted to finish university and not hurry up. The Gentile girls were getting married right and left because it was wartime in 1944. So, and it was a rush of marriages at that time. But I was in no hurry, and I wanted definitely knew what I wanted. I wanted to finish and graduate. And when I did finish and graduate, my mother was afraid I'd go to a small little town, marry a goy, and that would be the end of me. But instead, I went to Detroit to look for a job in Detroit because I had my brother there, the one that brought him into the scrap business. And I stayed here a little bit, and I really did not like Detroit because it seemed to me it was all sports, and no cultural here. There wasn't any chance for me to hear concerts, go to plays, do that. In the meantime, I had a sister in New York. I said, well, we'll try New York. And I went to New York. I stayed with my sister for a little while, and I got a job at New York Public Library as a librarian due to the journalism background, and I could help other students that came there. Stayed there for a year, and he came to New York. He asked me again. He wanted me to get married, and he was ready, I was ready, and that was it. We took an old-fashioned walk in Central Park, and we got engaged.
I got a shotgun tried to match me up with a girl in Chicago. So I went to visit the girl. The father of the girl wanted to buy me shirts and everything, and I don't get bought. I went out on a date, and that was it, and I realized what I had back home. I went to her father's house, and I asked her father for her hand in marriage. He says he was so happy to hear that. And then I took a train into New York City, and we went into the park.
Central Park.
And on the George Washington Bridge, I proposed to her.
And we walked through the leaves in Central Park, October the 12th.
Yeah, and
Columbus Day.
Came back to Detroit. We got married in my mother-in-law's house on March 19th, 1950.
In Iowa City.
In Iowa City, Iowa. We left for Chicago. It was a big snowstorm. We stopped in Davenport, Iowa for our first night of honeymoon in that little hotel in Davenport, Iowa.
And on the way back, what did the butcher man say?
What?
What did the butcher man tell you? The
What?
butcher shop man, when we stopped in Davenport, Iowa. What did the butcher say to you?
Forget.
He forget, I remember, I always remember. He said, how's your mother and father? And he said, I don't know, we were on our honeymoon. And the butcher shop man said, in the Torah it said, you should leave your house of your father and your mother and cling to each other, and I wish you many happiness.